Dargeth said, showed some friends one of the vids where the Wormsbane interest reveals itself as you round the bend in the tunnel leading to it. They audibly gasp at the effect of it. It's almost magical set piece, how it's done. All of that to say, the team is absolutely on the right track with stuff like this. Right on, man. You know, that kind of thing has me hyped. Like, hearing that has me hyped. Following one of our friends and family's testers' adventures, I've been talking to them about their adventures, and sort of seeing their progression as a player that hasn't played this style of old school MMO before. Tin Schulman, yeah, it is HGRP, and that is probably very much what happened. Hit the limit of 24 lights per 16 by 16 tile. Yeah, so we'll have to look at some of it, but anyways, like following their progression and seeing them evolve and like have some of those moments. And mind you, this person that I've been talking to and watching their sort of evolution within our game, they're an experienced modern MMO player. But in playing sort of the way they do and then playing our game, there's really this growth and evolution of them as a player and sort of like that sense of wonder and like overcoming challenges. And they're overcoming challenges of just like, oh, this is really sketchy and I'm afraid of corpse recovery and I don't know that I want to go into the, you know, I'm not really a dungeon player anyway. And the next thing you know, it's like, oh, I got some new spells and I decided I wanted to go into the dungeon. And it's like, oh, you know what? And I was able to go in. And then there's this other player that got, you know, they're a lower level player and they died and they needed help getting to their corpse. And so I was like envising them and helping them and I could fight. And it was just like this evolution from like, oh yeah, I'm not really that into the dungeons and they're a bit sketchy, to like going in and helping people with corpse recoveries and just like talking about how like awesome it felt, you know, and the that sense of like growing in power. And it's just like, yeah, I read it. I was just so happy. I immediately read it out to my wife and it's just like, and I need to ask them if I can relay that, you know, the details of that personal growth within the game, you know, to the team and stuff in more specific terms. But it was really cool. And, you know, to me, it very much felt like someone having that classic experience, which is, it's the target. Tiny deep beetles. I don't think I've been in this room since the deep beetles were added. So there's a strong belief that there will be a generation of MMO players that, you know, a lot of our folks are 35 plus that come in here in their 30s, you know, and older and have played EQ, played Dayak, played UO, all that stuff. But I really do believe that once people kind of get a feel for the vibe that we're shooting for, if we maintain the vibe, right? If we maintain the rough edges, if we maintain some of the things that do make the feel different and do force people to be social, and do have people participate in the community proactively because that's what they enjoy doing and they want to share with other people. I think it's going to feel like a different, it's going to be a new option for a lot of people, and we may surprise ourselves. We may find that we're capable of getting, you know, our if we look at how we've kind of pictured our audience, potential audience in the past, like I wrote up a thing that was just kind of a very simplistic breakdown, but it was like, you know, essentially people that have played these games before, people that played UO and EQ and Dayak and stuff, primary target, right? A lot of you folks. Primary target. Secondary targets are going to be, and, you know, I don't know which one's going to be bigger. It's going to be people that have maybe never played an MMO before, but asked the same questions that we did back in the day, which was like, hey, is there an you know, like an online experience, like one of these metaverse things or whatever? Is there like a Fortnite, but it's like it's Dungeons and Dragons kind of thing? Because D&D is huge, right? It's like 40 million people playing D&D. It's in the zeitgeist. And then some of those people may come into MMO for the first time. On the other side, I think there's going to be a number of younger people, you know, 20s and younger, that will hear about it and be like, oh man, this sounds challenging, or oh, this is different, you know, or oh, I kind of like the vibe. And they'll come in and they'll be like the individual that I met in Unrest on P99 that was playing EQ for the first time, 20 years old or 22 years old, and just kind of heard about a game that had that vibe. Right. You know, some of the people that we've talked to that have, you know, purposely sought out a game with specific challenge points and a game lacking certain features. And those are our secondary sort of targets. And who knows, right? It may come together really nicely. Eminem is playable while scrolling TikTok. Zoomer approved. Yeah, right. We keep saying you can play it and eat a sandwich, but you can play it and, you know, make a TikTok dance or some shit. Once we share it with friends and family, it will spread. Everfest, I hope so. I believe so. To achieve the type of MMO you guys are going for these days, you have to really stick to your guns on the beliefs. I am with you for sure, but I recognize the pressure to bend. Many do. Yeah, like I said, I get, there's a fair amount of me being the no man that happens. And it definitely, like, don't get me wrong, it gets a little tiring, at times, but I don't see how we make this game without, sticking to some of these beliefs and assumptions. And the thing is, we can always change our minds on some of these things. Now, if we find that one of those beliefs just really isn't right, it's an MMO. You know, like EQ today is very different from EQ when we first played it, right? For better or worse in different areas. But what I mean is, it can change as needed. Turnip said, it's always impressive when people discover P99 EQ for the first time and stick with it. It was much easier to stick with back in 1999 when MMO scene was a novelty. But now with so much else out there, it's crazy to see this old game stick on something. But there's not so much else that feels like that, is the thing, right? That's the thing. There's just not so much that has that vibe. It's just a different vibe. And we're doing our best to deconstruct that, you know, vibe that existed back in the day in these older games, and see, you know, how do we, right? It's every little thing. It's the size of a hallway. It's, you know, crazy color choices. It's a certain degree of realism coupled with a you know, a degree of fantasy, right? Like, my character's not overly stylized, and yet it's a fantastic world. You know, all of these little decisions go into making a different experience. You had mentioned the entrance to Wormsbane. I'll pop there in a minute. I'll just zone back to the front.